Hey, everybody. Jackie's back with you. I hope you had a chance to take a breath. Maybe you went for a walk. Maybe you had some tea. Maybe you fed your kids. Um, Maybe you had a glass of wine. But I hope you took some time to let the things that we covered come into your body and come into your mind. And I want to remind you how glad we are that you're here with us. We're so delighted to now introduce you to Valarie Kaur, who might not need an introduction, but I will tell you that long time ago at Auburn Seminary, I heard Valarie do a talk, and she held a blue marble and talked about world events. And I still have that marble because there was a way in which it symbolized for me the hopes and the dreams that a young activist, lawyer, filmmaker was putting in the world. And so I hang on to it, and I hang on to her. She's my little sister. She's the founder of the Revolutionary Love Project and the book of the most beautiful memoir and manifesto, See No Stranger. So with no further ado, let's have Valarie be in, and we'll have a chance to talk to her later. Valarie, welcome.
Thank you, my beloved sister. Thank you, Jackie. And thank you, Middle Church, for convening us once again, for convening us every year around this movement of revolutionary love, and for convening us this year especially. My eyes are already watery. I miss you all that much. I've been sheltering in place here in Los Angeles for 6 weeks as of today, and my children are with my husband upstairs. You might see them streaking across behind me. And we have been well in that children require, especially when they're small, they require magic and structure. And so singing and doing story time and dance time has been helping me breathe. But after they go to bed, I've just been struggling with these cycles of grief, rage, fear. And I have to tell you, Jackie, that it's in those moments that I find solace from all of you, from faith leaders, thought leaders, artists, and activists. I see you as essential workers of a different kind. I see you as essential workers for the future. You are telling the story of the world that we want on the other side of this. For this is what I know to be true, that when this pandemic ends, there is no going back to the world that was. There's only stepping into a future that is unknown. And the choices we make now as individuals and as a society will shape that world to come. We are moving through the darkness together. So I wanted to begin by naming the pain of this moment and then offering what I can. So what we know to be true is, as of today, the death toll in the United States has exceeded 50,000 people from COVID. We know that this pandemic has been a social X-ray, exposing the broken structures that have heaped suffering upon suffering on people who have already long suffered. This pandemic has disproportionately killed Black people. The legacy of policies that have created disparities in health, income, and safety for centuries. This virus is devastating Indigenous communities, homeless and transient communities. We're seeing outbreaks in prisons and jails and immigration detention centers. We are seeing essential workers, who mostly women, a lot of women of color on the front lines, who deliver our packages and stock our grocery stores, working without hazard pay. We are seeing healthcare workers on the front lines of this crisis without protective gear, risking their lives and those of their families to serve people they do not know, to give their lives for people they do not know. And I'm holding in my heart right now the face of 5-year-old Skylar Herbert. She's a little Black girl in Detroit whose parents are first responders. And perhaps I'm holding her in my heart because she is 5 years old and my son is 5 years old, and she is among the youngest people to have died from COVID. All while the lawmakers in our country right now have failed to take the robust, strong, meaningful, direct action that is required to save and protect her and the most vulnerable among us. At the same time, we are seeing hate violence against our Asian American sisters and brothers and siblings. We have seen 1,500 hate incidents in the last 3 weeks, acid throwing and beatings and racial slurs. Many of our Asian American family members are reporting that they are sheltering in place, not just because of COVID-19, but even more so that they do not become targets of hate. And meanwhile, as all this rages on, We are seeing those in power move quickly, swiftly, without hesitation to exploit this crisis. We're seeing autocrats around the world expanding their powers to survey and suppress at a moment when we cannot assemble and protest in the streets. As our sister Arundhati Roy in India has warned us, we were sleepwalking into authoritarian regimes before, and now we are panic running into them. And here in the United States, our government has already successfully shut down our borders, restricted asylum seekers, enacted an unnecessary ban on immigration, sought the power to detain indefinitely, and allowed some states to move to restrict access to abortion, all in the name of emergency measures. Now, for many of us in communities of color, this pandemic and what it has exposed and how we are responding to it recalls old traumas. And for me as a Sikh American, this pandemic has felt like, oftentimes, like watching the Twin Towers fall in slow motion. In the aftermath of 9/11, then too, the nation was presented with an existential crisis that took thousands of lives. Then too, many of us felt like initially we were united in our humanity, but very quickly we saw waves of hate explode across the nation, beatings, stabbings, and attacks on a subset of Asian American communities seen monolithically as them. Then too, hate violence was followed quickly by state violence, restrictions on immigration and civil liberties and xenophobic rhetoric and an expansion of executive powers that we are still trying to undo almost 2 decades later. Then too, there are those who use this crisis to seize power and turn profits. Then too, we were told that it would all go back to normal soon. This pandemic is new, but the pattern is not. The pattern is familiar. At night, after I put my babies to bed and when that grief seizes my throat and I toss and turn and I can't sleep, it's the stories of my ancestors who come back to me. And when I was a little girl, my grandfather used to scoop me up and put me on his lap and tell me the stories of our origins. And my favorite story was our origin story. And so I would just like to, after that breathless orienting to the moment, I would like to put breath back in our bodies in the way that happens to me every night by sharing with you this story. Are you ready? It's our origin story. The story goes, more than 500 years ago, around the world in what is now Punjab, India, there lived a man named Nanak. And Nanak saw the world around him through the eyes of wonder, but he was also distraught by what he saw. Violence, endless turmoil, injustices, discrimination, suffering upon suffering. And so one day he retreated from the world and he disappeared by the bank of a river. The story goes, he sat by that river in quiet contemplation. And the sun rose and the sun fell, and the sun rose and the sun fell, and the sun rose and the sun fell, and still Nanak sat in contemplation. People thought him a dead man. People thought him a drowned man. But on the third day, he emerged with a vision on his lips, a vision of unity. Ik, Om God, the unity of humanity and the unity of the world. And this vision struck him with a sense of awe, a sense of ecstatic wonder called Vismad, and he began to sing a song of oneness. I'd like to read to you from my book, See No Stranger, because the title of this book is inspired by what Nanak saw and what Nanak felt. Love made him see with new eyes. Everyone around him was a part of him he did not yet know. I see no stranger, said Guru Nanak. I see no enemy. Guru Nanak taught that all of us could see the world in this way, that there is a voice inside of each of us, the I that names itself as separate from you. It resides in the bowl that holds our individual consciousness, but separateness is an illusion. When we quiet the chatter in our heads through music or meditation or recitation or song, the boundaries begin to disappear. The bowl breaks. For a moment, we taste the truth, sweet as nectar. We are part of one another. We can look upon anyone or anything and say, you are a part of me I do not yet know. Joy rushes in. Long after the moment passes, we can choose to remember the truth of our interconnectedness, that we belong to one another. We can choose to see no stranger. My sisters, my brothers, my siblings, I share that story with you now because for the first time in my life, I am seeing this story with new eyes. You see, Guru Nanak did not have his revelation in the temple or in the city or among people at all. No, that he was retreated from the world. He was alone by the riverbank. He was physically distant from all other people in order to remember, in order to get quiet enough to remember the truth all along of our interconnectedness. And I think about all of our great saints and spiritual teachers and social reformers. They had their revelations on mountaintops or beneath trees or deep in their dreams. They too were physically distant. They had to get quiet enough to awaken to the truth. And I began to think about all of us now, all of us who have the privilege of sheltering in place, how millions of us are awakening to the truth that we might have denied before, that this virus has shown us the ways that we are interconnected, interdependent, that we are only as safe or as well as the most vulnerable among us, that no number of bans or border walls or hierarchies can deny the fact that we belong to each other, that we are part of one global human family. And the truth, that truth can cause some of us to retreat, because it makes us vulnerable to each other. It is a frightening thing to realize that we hold each other's lives in each other's hands. And those of us who have wanted to sever our connection to each other have taken action out of fear and self-interest. And for too long has this world been governed, have institutions been structured by those who would want to sever our connections, build boundaries, hierarchies, inequalities, injustices, profit from those injustices, keeping some people vulnerable, some people disposable. But what if this was an opportunity like never before for those of us who embrace the truth of our togetherness to take action now, to rise now, to remake the world to come out of love and solidarity? What if this is our time of transition? You know, when I was a little girl, I always thought that history was linear, that the story of progress in America was linear, that my grandfather sacrificed so that I would have more equality and safety than ever before, and now I'm a mother and my son is less safe than my grandfather was or I was. And so I've had to take a different view of history. And I want to share that view of history now because I think it might be helpful to you. Looking back on the events of my life, I was so impatient for change. In the aftermath of 9/11, we organized to quell the hate, but violence on the street was followed by violence on by the state. So we protested the war on terror and organized a strong anti-war movement, but the wars began again anyway and brought more destruction. And so we built a broad-based movement that elected Barack Obama, and I thought that we had transcended history. But progress during the Obama era was slow and incremental. And meanwhile, white nativist forces gained enough power to deliver the Trump presidency. And now executive orders and policies and assaults rain down on us so hard and so fast that we barely have time to breathe between them, especially now during this pandemic. If we take a linear view of history, then we are sliding backwards into darkness. But if we begin to think of birthing labor, if we see the story of America as one long labor, then we have a different view. Progress during birthing labor is cyclical, not linear. It is a series of expansions and contractions, and each turn through the cycle brings us closer to what is being born. We see this pattern throughout US history. A generation fought to abolish slavery and free people from bondage, but it was followed by a Jim Crow system. Another generation built a civil rights movement to end segregation and win equal rights, but it was followed by criminal justice, immigration, and national security systems that continued to punish Black and brown people. The labor is ongoing, the injustice relentless, but each time people organized, and each turn through the cycle opened a little more space for equality and justice. It also created ancestral memory. And this is what I really want you to know. We carry the memory of movements that came before us, even now. Like the body in labor, we have gained more embodied knowledge about what to do when the crises come. We can turn to the wisdom of our ancestors, even when crises feel unprecedented. We can turn to their wisdom for how to labor, to wonder, to grieve, to fight, to rage, to listen, to reimagine, and yes, to breathe and to push and to find the bravery we need for transition. My sisters and brothers, we know what to do. You know what to do. This is a time to double down on love. Revolutionary love. And I believe that love, your revolutionary love, is the medicine for this time. And so here is my offering. For too long, we have let people define love as a rush of emotion, something that feels good and passes, thoughts and prayers that require no action. But no, social reformers, spiritual teachers in history, and any one of us who has done the labor of caregiving, we know that love is more than a rush of feeling. Love is sweet labor, fierce, bloody, imperfect, and life-giving. And that means love requires us to harness all of our emotions in the labor. Joy is the gift of love. Grief, the grief that we are feeling now, is the price of love. And rage, our rightful, righteous rage, is the force that we must engage to protect that which is loved. Revolutionary love, what I define as revolutionary love, is the choice to enter into that labor for others who may not look like us, even for our opponents and for ourselves. And I see this revolutionary love in history and even now in three broad practices: see no stranger, tend the wound, and breathe and push. The first practice, see no stranger. Here we are, gathering even now, even in this darkness, even when each of us is carrying a heavy load. We are seeking to do our part because each of you are already practicing this. You are mustering the energy and the bravery that you need to reach out, to imagine all those who are suffering right now as your sisters and brothers and family. We are finding ways to see no stranger. We are connecting with each other. We are grieving and organizing with each other virtually. That grieving is frontline social justice work in a time like this. We are singing on rooftops. We are cheering at the same hour every night to show healthcare workers that they are not alone. We're creating mutual aid networks to fill in the vacuum left by government, making masks, delivering food. And we are seeing local officials do what we're always told was impossible before. We are finding shelter for the homeless. We are stopping evictions. We are releasing thousands of people from detention. We are reducing arrests. We are getting meals to children who rely on school lunches. We are opening hospitals in communities that lack care. We are delivering paid sick leave. We are accepting that healthcare is a human right that should not depend on one's wealth or one's work. And each of these acts of solidarity, in every moment that we choose to see no stranger and act on that vision, I see glimpses of the society that is longing to be, the nation that is longing to be born. Is this the darkness of the tomb? Is this the darkness of the womb? It is both in this moment. And I choose to lean into the vision of that which must be if we keep acting, keep mobilizing. But there are opponents who stand in our way. Even now, opponents in Congress, opponents in the White House, and opponents on our streets who are refusing to comply with social distancing measures, who are protesting for their right to gather even when it is dangerous. And so what do we do with those opponents? The second practice is tend the wound. It begins with honoring rage, our own rage, protecting spaces for that rage with each other, finding ways to give it expression. When it is on the outside of us, we are in relationship to that rage and we can gain information from it about what we need to do next. For those of us who are safe enough, we can listen to those opponents, listen to them, deny their impulse to allow us to dehumanize them, to see even them as part of us. You see, what's at stake for those people, when we start to hear beneath their slogans and sound bites, they're taking the action that they are taking because they are afraid of their own fragility, their own vulnerability. They are clinging to the belief that white supremacy or capitalism or borders shut can protect them. Listening to them gives us information about how we can reimagine the world so that clinging to hierarchies of human value is no longer how we organize society. The last 4 years have been an assault on our democratic institutions. And so what is required now is for us to take that information to reimagine, restructure the institutions of our society to come, all of them. Yes, we need to mobilize to elect leaders committed to justice work and confront all the voter suppression tactics that will be used during this pandemic come November. But I want you to remember that Inauguration Day, we can't make the same mistake we did before, right? Remember that Inauguration Day is the beginning and not the end of that political action, of that long labor. We have to stay in the labor. And that brings me to the third practice, breathe and push. For us to show up to the labor every day, for us to show up to one another, we have to be breathing ourselves. How are you breathing each day? Even as you are sheltering in place, if you have the privilege to, are you still sleeping? Are you eating? Are you taking a walk? I realized that it had been a week since I had seen the blue sky, going from Zoom room to Zoom room to Zoom room to organize. When mental health is a serious concern for all of us, we have to weave singing and dancing and stretching and breathing and communing with nature as much as we can in order to push. For this is a time of massive transition, not just in the world, but in each of our individual lives. And during this transition, we have to push during the contraction, not after. It is searing and painful and tears flesh. Our society is being torn open, our lives torn open to birth something new. And so we have to be breathing to know how to push next. Can you summon into your life and into your own mind voices that will help you bring forth your deepest wisdom for how to breathe and how to push? Will you let joy in, even now, even during this labor, as part of our medicine? For joy reminds us of everything that is good and just and beautiful and worth fighting for. Every night, no matter how many people I've had to mourn that day who we've lost from this illness, every night I still have to dance with my children. That is our evening ritual, our evening routine. And dancing with them is what puts breath back in my body so that I can show up the next day and show up with you here and continue to the labor. I leave you with this. I ask you to summon your ancestors at night when you feel alone. I feel my father's father at my back right now. He lived through the 1918 Spanish flu as an immigrant farm worker, and he lived through all of the decades of racism and inequality since. And through all of that, he retained his dignity and passed on his resilience. May we call our ancestors to our back now. May they give us the strength and the clarity to be each other's midwives, to whisper in each other's ear, yes, yes, this will be one long labor. So breathe and push, my love. Breathe and push. Thank you so much. Vaikuru ji ka khalsa, Vaikuru ji ki fateh. The beloved community belongs to divine oneness, and so does all that it achieves. Oh, Jackie, you're on mute, my love. But I can hear you breathing with me.
Yeah, I just feel so midwifed by your talk, Lord. I feel so pushed and breathed into and encouraged and oh my God. Thank you, baby.
We've been laboring for a long time together, Jackie. And honestly, just being able to reach out and weep with you, that's how I know I'm not alone and how I will get through this and how we will get through this. We know how to do this, right? We know how.
Oh, we know how. You remember, Valarie, when you were getting ready to give a talk someplace? Maybe it was like at the Supreme Court. You and Gene Robinson were going to go, something?
It was the Pentagon.
That story. First of all, by the way, everybody just take a breath. Ready? You, my sister, are a prophet for our time. I just need to say it. That is just stunning. Just stunning. Balm, balm for our souls, inspiration, like that stuff people don't, so they get stretch marks, all that stuff. You were all that stuff. Okay. But can you tell that story about you going to talk to Jean and you and I talking that night? Do you remember?
I was stepping into a site of war making and asked to tell the stories of our faith and call for revolutionary love without being co-opted by the machine.
Yes.
And I could not feel breath in my body. And I called you, Jackie, the night before, and I read to you my words, and you listened and you witnessed and you held me. And we weren't physically in person, right? Through the phone, you were able to reach through and take my hand as your little sister and breathe with me. And I remember walking into the Pentagon and with my breast pump, because I was a new mommy, and I had no place to pump in the Pentagon. And behind the curtain, I had a circle of women surround me so that I could make milk for my baby. I just think about how in the breathless spaces, right, in our bodies and in institutions in the world, that it is still possible to create enough space for breath and for mothering and for loving, and that alone is a revolutionary act. That's what we have to do now. We have to mother ourselves, says Audre Lorde. We have to mother each other. That's what you're doing for so many of us, Jackie.
No, sweetie, all of us who are doing this work in this place where the feminine in us is sometimes squashed, just like a little 2 sentences about that, that then to tell the story, and she did go, and she did go with our colleague Jean Robinson, and she did stand before a giant gathering of people who were intent upon squashing her, but she stood up for the right for Sikhs to wear themselves, to be themselves in the military in the world. And like it went forward as positive from vulnerable motherness, from I got to feed my baby, Kavi, my little boy in the world. But the strength of the woman who can birth the child, be fed by her mother, birth the child, can birth the world. And I'm thinking, Valarie, every time I hear you talk about this, I think the feminine in every human being vibrates with the truth of what you're saying. The men are vibrating with the truth of what you're saying, right?
That's it. And you named it, that this is not a biological right. This is a human right. This is a capacity that exists within every one of us. And one of the great, I think, violences that we've done to our men and our little boys, I think about my son, is to convince them of the lie that they are not capable of that kind of tender caregiving, that kind of mothering and loving. And this is why oh, Jackie, you have seen me. I have been struggling to write.
The book is good. Get the book.
And you know what? I finished it. I finished it. It took me 3 years to write this. Really, I began 18 years ago collecting the stories for this book. It is my third child. And I finished it. I sent the last edits weeks ago, and the next day the news of the pandemic hit all of us in a very real way. And I thought, oh my God, this is already outdated. And I opened the book and I read the introduction, and I realized that I only had to add the word global pandemic to the introduction, and the entire book held. There are 10 core practices of revolutionary love in this book, and I see them now as medicine for our times. They're medicine for us. It's our collective wisdom, and I'm hopeful. I want to put the book in each of your hands. And I want to tell you, if you go to seenostranger.com, you can pre-order the book now. I so want to make this as my offering to all of you who have held me in community for so long.
It is a beautiful book, everyone. And more than that, if you are stirred, which you are, by Valarie's amazing ability to tell you what's happening in here and out here, you got to buy it. There's a question here, Valarie, that I want to make sure we get to, and then I'm going to see if you can stay with us because there's going to be more Q&A. But Lenore's been asking great questions, and she's thanking you, but also saying, do you have any advice to offer us in this situation where prophets have had their revelations while inside their home with children running around them? And what I want to say to Lenore is, Valarie had some revelations while Ananda was trying to come out of her. So talk about this revelation and kid thing.
I'll tell you the story of my daughter's birth because I'm holding on to it now. And she's now almost 18 months old, but her birth was treacherous. My pregnancy was difficult. I was in a wheelchair for half the pregnancy. I was in multiple ER rooms, hooked up to IVs for hydration and for meds. I had hyperemesis. I survived this pregnancy, and the birth itself felt like fire and death. In the course of 4 hours, I went from 1 to 10 centimeters in 4 hours. And each contraction was thundering pain. And then, the body in labor carries the memory of previous labors, right? And so I had known enough from my son's birth to know how to breathe and how to push, and that when the pain subsided, all I had to do was release everything and give myself to the present moment, and that would put breath in my body. And when I started to do that, during the breathing, I had an image of being in a meadow. Contraction hits. I took the next breath. I had another image of being with her in the meadow. Contraction hits. Take the next breath. I had an image of her with curly black hair, long and giggling and cooing in my arms. Contraction hits. Take the next breath. I look up into the sky. We're looking at clouds and making animal shapes. Contraction hits. Next, it's raining. Next, we're picking flowers. I was smiling between my contractions. My mother and my husband were like, "What is happening?" And soon that got me to the moment of transition where I could no longer go into the meadow, but I had retained a memory of the future. Like I saw her, and that vision of the world that could be of her in the future was enough to give me the joy and energy for now. And so, Mira, and anyone who is struggling with breathlessness, I ask you just to create spaces at night after they've gone to sleep, while they're taking a nap, right? You know, when you're going from here to there, just a breath, just a moment, to be present in the present moment, to give your senses to what is beautiful and safe and good around you. Because when you do that, then maybe magic might happen. Then you might get an image, a picture, a feeling, a vision of what the world could be on the other side of this, that you might gain enough energy to continue in the labor. That's all you need, is to weave that. The midwife doesn't say breathe and push the rest of the way. She says breathe and then push and then breathe again, to weave breath throughout. Even if it's only a split second, my love, to weave breath throughout is how we will make the labor last, even when we have babies running circles around us.
I don't think you know, but I've got grandchild and grandchild in the house with us, 2 years old and 2 months. So, Judy, can you stick around for a little bit? Okay. We are going to move into the next beautiful conversation with some of the most amazing people in the world, but not before I just say to Valarie, your words, your writing, your faith, your hope gives me hope, Valarie. And for everyone who is listening, someone says breath that creates space. Yeah, get the book. Follow Valarie at Revolutionary Love Project. Know that she is leading the way to a revolution that we need. I love you so much.
I love you so much. And I'm going to make one little invitation, especially to Mira. I realized that I couldn't put breath in my body unless I was gathering with others. So every day, every single weekday, Monday through Friday, 1 o'clock Pacific, on Facebook Live and Instagram Live, I lead a meditation for 30 minutes. and so I'll see you there if you need that.
Monday through Friday. What time again? Say it.
1 o'clock Pacific time.
Thank you, my love. Thank you so much.